It's 5:05 and welcome into a Wednesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour on Charlotte's FM News Talk 107.9 FM WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Got a pretty interesting report this morning over on our website, carolinajournal.com, with the headline, North Carolina Energy Report warns of rising rates amid demand boom. We got a recent report. It was released on Sunday from the North Carolina Energy Policy Task Force. That group outlined recommendations to ensure North Carolinians have affordable, reliable, and clean energy supplies as demands from an expanding population and rapid business growth continues across the Tar Heel State. The governor, Josh Stein, said in a press release, as demand for energy grows, families and businesses need to be able to count on dependable, sustainable, and affordable power. I'm grateful for the task force for its thoughtful work to inform policies that protect affordability, reliability, and sustainability. And I look forward to our state building on its progress in the months ahead. The governor himself created the task force by executive order back in August of last year. It is co-chaired by North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality Secretary Reed Wilson, as well as a Representative Kyle Hall, who is the Republican from Stokes County, with it also including some 30 energy experts and policy makers. Their primary focus has been on identifying policies and technological solutions to address the state's growing energy need, driven by things like data centers, advanced manufacturing, and, of course, population growth. The governor said during a recent press conference, there's no question that the demand for energy is growing rapidly, and it is in part due to North Carolina being the number one state where people from other states are moving to. We're extremely fast growing, but we're also seeing new types of businesses like server farms, data centers that are consuming incredible amounts of power. One data farm could consume as much as the entire city of Charlotte. That's just an incredible addition of load demand that it is without precedent in state history. So we've got to figure out how we respond to this and how we deal with these things like data centers. The report includes initial findings and recommendations that have been developed by task force members during their first 6 months of work. They note that Duke Energy's 2025 load forecast projects total demand across its two Carolina systems. You've got Energy and Progress, if you are a Duke Energy customer, is set to increase by 16% to nearly 60% through the year 2040. According to the press release, electricity demand in North Carolina rose 7% between the years 2005 and 2025, so over a span of 20 years. From 2017 to 2024, the average residential electricity bill, however, is risen by nearly 30%. Almost two-thirds of the increase in North Carolina's electrical bills have been due to rising fuel costs that mostly have been driven by the rising price of natural gas. The major public utility serving the state's project significantly increases is set to significantly increase its utility bills by 2040, even beyond the proposed rate increases for many North Carolina's residential customers of 16 to 18% projected in just the next 24 months or 2 years. John Sanders, who is the director of the Center for Food, Power, and Life at the John Locke Foundation, told the Carolina Journal, Governor Stein noting the rapid growth in North Carolina's energy demand. But with that being the case, we should not be in a time where state policy is focused on shutting down reliable baseload producers of electricity like coal. Nor should we be focused on building unreliable, unproductive energy sources. Unfortunately, under the state's carbon plan, Duke is having to build the least amount of most productive resources, nuclear, and the most amount of least productive resources, solar. Sanders noted that compared with solar, nuclear is about 4 times as productive and natural gas is about 2 times as productive, and both can operate overnights during stormy conditions and other sorts of inclement weather. One of the ways to help electricity customers save on their bills, John Sanders told the Carolina Journal, is to not cause them to pay for overbuilding unreliable resources. Back in November, Duke Energy filed a request with the North Carolina Utilities Commission for a proposed 15% or $1 billion increase for Duke Energy Carolinas, which would be about $727 million in 2027 and another $275 million in 2028 with their customers there, or about a 15% increase for those that are members of Duke Energy Progress, which is split kind of east and west across the state, a whopping $528 million in 2027 and another $200 million in 2028. Duke Energy says that those increases would be used for new investments to boost reliability and support economic growth across the state, and it is going to be very interesting to see what the North Carolina Utilities Commission does. They are a legal entity and body here in North Carolina and do have to give the final sign-off or approval on rate increases that you see coming from major utilities like Duke Energy. Task force members made the following recommendations in their first report. As I mentioned, this entity kicked off in August of last year thanks to an executive order from Democrat Governor Josh Stein. So the recommendations are as follows. Develop options for large load tariffs, which are specialized standard set of terms and rules for large load customers such as data centers, intended to ensure that the majority of the costs associated with those customers are paid by that customer. Develop options for bring your own capacity and alternative capacity procurement methods, which could allow these large load customers like data centers to directly select and acquire the energy resources that they need. For example, them building their own essential power plant next to their facility. Develop options to encourage load flexibility, such as having large customers reduce the amount of power that they use during peak periods or during system emergencies. Another recommendation from the committee, exploring reforms to the processes for large load and generation interconnects, as those interconnections involves how electricity generators and users connect to the grid. A few more recommendations: access the dollar and strategic value of existing sales and use tax exemptions for data centers. While North Carolina has a sales tax exemption already for data center electricity users and equipment, the cost of these exemptions is currently unknown. There are plenty of other recommendations from this task force as well, as it is scheduled to release its next report in a year, February 2027. We will see if lawmakers take any action on any of these recommendations. All of this coming from North Carolina's Energy Policy Task Force. It is a group of a little over 30 individuals, including state lawmakers, those in the energy sector, as well as individuals from the Stein administration making these recommendations. Obviously, the intention would be for anything useful that comes out of this committee, that not only the governor but state lawmakers take that and run with it as it relates to making electricity, as we heard from the governor, dependable, sustainable, and affordable, all while making sure that we are protecting affordability, reliability, and sustainability here across the Tar Heel state. We've got a list of all of the recommendations from this entity available this morning over on our website, carolinajournal.com. Look for the story headline, North Carolina Energy Report warns of rising rates amid demand boom. It's now 5:14 on the Carolina Journal News Hour, Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. We'll head on over to the traffic center, get a look at the roadways this morning with the legendary, the incredible Boomer Von Cannon.
Still trying to get there, my man.
One week at a time, Boomer. Okay. 1 week at a time. We'll get there. It's 521. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good Wednesday morning to you. Early voting continues across the state of North Carolina, and there's an interesting situation that can unfold where somebody votes during the early voting period but dies before Election Day, and which is, of course, coming up here in the primary on March the 3rd. That has been the subject of a lot of interesting dialogue over the last couple of years. We've got a very interesting story this morning over on our website, carolinajournal.com. To walk us through some of those details, Teresa Opeka from Carolina Journal joins us. Teresa, we've got a ruling from a judge, then an order abruptly reversed, her own order, her own ruling. What are you tracking on this story? It's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it is. Good morning, Nick. Thanks for having me. That's an easy way to put it. So this came down last week, where we had a judge, administrative law judge, issue a new order striking her own ruling from the day before. Okay, so it gets a little confusing. You can go on our website and see. I'm probably going to mispronounce what the exact wording is here, but it said sponte, and it's SUASPONTE. That means the judge, which was Linda Nelson, made a decision on her own without a request from any party in a legal dispute. This came down, and meaning that she issued a ruling last Thursday, but decided to backtrack and say, nope, I'm going to change my mind and we're going to scrub that. And she backdated it on Friday to Thursday, kind of like it didn't happen. So, when people are looking at this, getting this information, and all of a sudden now it's null and void, you got to wonder, like, why? What happened? The order on Friday reverses a legal victory for Steve Holland of Weaverville and Michael Frazier of Salisbury. They filed a complaint against the state election board. They both alleged that 7 Wake and Rowan County Board of Election members failed to follow a state board directive requiring the removal of early votes cast by individuals who died before Election Day. This was November 8th of 2024. It's a very odd story.
And this comes back to some of the rules and some of the processes that are supposed to be followed, not only by the State Board of Elections, but, I think, Teresa, probably a misconception that a lot of people have here across the state of North Carolina is that the state board runs elections. It's not actually the case. It's all 100 county local board of elections that are the ones that are actually responsible for administering, for example, the primary elections that we have going on right now.
That is correct. Yeah, it's definitely run by all 100 counties. It's not run by the State Board of Elections. They oversee everything, but they don't run the individual elections. And when we're getting back to, you're talking about the state laws or the laws involved with this. So there was a law that was revised, what's in a memorandum, was revised at the end of 2023. That directs county election boards to remove ballots cast by voters who voted early in person or by absentee ballot and died before the day of election. Again, numbered memoranda, they're the directives of the state board, and that includes the resolution on the state board delegation of authority. It's a long list of law. It was adopted by the state board at the end of 2023. So this was all according to state law that was all adopted in recent years. And the 2 gentlemen that we mentioned before said, you went against your own rules, right? So the state board at early in 2025, January, voted 3-2 along party lines not to basically go along with that. And at that time, the board was made up 3-2, 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans. It was Democratic members Alan Hirsch, Jeff Carmen, and Siobhan Millen, and Republican members Stacey Ford Eggers and Kevin Lewis. And now we have a different board that was named in May by State Auditor Dave Bullock. Still includes Carmen and Millen and Eggers, but now we have Francis DeLuca and Robert Ruscio as well.
Yeah, and Teresa, you're talking about these memorandums or these numbered memos, and without getting too much into the weeds, this has been a major point of contention now for many years between the local election officials as well as the state board of elections over what is actually state law versus what is a memo, what is guidance coming out of the state board of elections. Inherently, Teresa, those are two very different things. Laws are passed by the legislature, either signed or veto overridden by the General Assembly, while these memos are essentially just enacted by the state board of elections and are not, in fact, state law.
Correct. And I've been following the State Board of Elections, many of their meetings where they, in fact, I think they talked late last year about removing or archiving some of those memos. They were getting a little bit confusing or, maybe not needed any longer. So that was a big bone of contention, even among the State Board itself. So they were going over all of that. So yeah, it's not state law, it's something that the State Board enacted. But it's just a strange situation with this, since if these are your rules and you're going by them, why did you decide to kind of go against that? And also, why did this judge, she had a 14-page opinion. She was very thorough. She listed everything against why this should have been done by the state election board, and decided to reverse her decision on Friday. It is a very strange case.
And Teresa, I guess, where do we stand right now on this? Obviously, early voting is open right now. Folks have already begun casting ballots for many primaries, both Republican and Democrat, here across the state of North Carolina. Election day is still just a couple of weeks away. What is the current status for this, for anybody that may fall under this category of casting either an absentee by mail or an early in-person vote and then passing away before Election day?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I believe that I think this state board, if that's their rules, they should follow those rules. But we'd have to wait and see what would happen. But it's again, the makeup of the board is totally different than it was a year ago. So you might have a different situation. We did talk to Mr. Holland after the judge's reversal, and he was pretty blindsided. He said he was pretty surprised. He had no idea what was going on. He was interested to know what kind of precedent there is for that kind of an action, and it seemed strange, being that it was a 14-page opinion. It was pretty obvious that the judge had a well thought out opinion and did a whole lot of analysis on state cases, which were included in that opinion. So to have the about face on that and pull it back with no explanation is really concerning, according to Mr. Holland. That's what he said to me on Friday night. But we did. Mr. Holland also sent an email to us as board member Eggers, also Secretary Eggers at this point, stated last year when the state board considered the matter. He said it was an equal protection issue. Therefore, the state board should not sweep this under the rug. It needs a full hearing. That's from Mr. Holland. So right now, I would imagine the state board would follow their own rules. And if someone dies before, the election, before, the primary election, if they did early voting, they would have to rescind that. It just doesn't make any sense.
Now, you can, of course, take a look at these dueling legal opinions and legal orders. We've got some backstory on this as well. All of it available this morning over on our website, carolinajournal.com. We appreciate the update. Teresa Opeka joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:29 on Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 WBT. We'll get another look at the roadways with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey,
It's 5:36. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour, Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Early voting continues until February the 28th across North Carolina for the very important primary elections taking place here across the Tar Heel State. To walk us through what the last couple of days in early voting have looked like, the first couple of days may be a more accurate way to describe it, Dr. Andy Jackson from the John Locke Foundation joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Andy, great to have you again this morning. We chatted mid last week, right before polls opened on Thursday. People have had the opportunity over the last couple of days to get out and vote. What are you seeing so far?
Well, it's a relatively brisk pace. There's been 134,000 about folks that have come out to vote so far in this primary. That's actually faster than the last similar primary, which was in 2022, that also had a Senate election, no presidential primary there. In 2022, it was only 106,000. So it's going pretty well if you like to have, relatively high turnout for a primary. What we don't know is this equating to more voting or just earlier voting? And we're really not going to have the answer to that until March 3rd when we have the election day results for the primary.
And let me ask you this question. This is pretty in the weeds and pretty behind the scenes, but you talked about that 2022 primary, which actually took place in May. Candidate filing opened as it's supposed to in December. There was a legal action. It was immediately paused. That primary was pushed back a couple of months, which allowed candidates, in some cases, 60, if not 90 more days to campaign ahead of that primary. Can you draw a direct analog between what we saw in 2022, or do you have to go back even further to find another primary election in a midterm election year to maybe draw some of those comparisons? How do you deal with that when you're crunching some of these numbers?
Well, yeah, it's hard to be completely analogous with all of these year to year. I don't think that pushing it back to May had a huge difference because it was a non-presidential election year. So that Senate race was the top of the ticket for both of those. It was the big draw, and it just so happened, at least on the Democratic side, just like this time, it's kind of boring. We knew who the winner was going to be. It's going to be Sherry Beasley. There was at least nominally a little more question on the Republican side there, and so I think that the numbers are looking pretty good, and I think that 2026 is probably going to be a little bit higher. Maybe it's just North Carolina's population growth that is driving this, but I don't think it's too far off. Now, I will personally argue I would like us to return to May primaries to give the parties more chance to vet candidates. We could conceivably have candidate filing for the 2026 election if we did it this way in 2026, which would be nice. So we don't have to have candidate filing the previous year right before Christmas. But that's neither here nor there at this point. I think it's so far the data is showing that this year is at least comparable, probably a little ahead of the last time around like this.
When we talked last week, you walked us through the process. If you're a Republican, you can vote in the Republican primary. If you're a Democrat, you can vote in the Democrat primary. However, the unaffiliated voter here in North Carolina, which as we've reported many a times over on our website, carolinajournal.com, talk about it plenty of times here on the News Hour, Andy, is our largest voting bloc in North Carolina. Those individuals can choose either the Republican or Democrat ballot. How has the ballot poll shucken out so far? Are more Democrat ballots being pulled, more Republicans? What is that data looking like?
Well, so far, Democrats are ahead of Republicans altogether. Of all the ballots, about 58% of those are going Democratic, compared to about 42% for Republicans. Just among unaffiliated voters, you're looking at about 54% of unaffiliateds are voting in the Democratic primary compared to 46 for the Republican primary. So the big question there is whether or not this is showing more general interest in the Democratic primary among unaffiliateds, or is this just a case of, since the Democrats seem to be a little more active in this primary, at least with early voting, is this just those unaffiliated who are voting tend to be more like Democrats, because unaffiliated is not like this huge block of voters. There are really some unaffiliated who are really lean Democrats, other unaffiliated that are lean Republicans. So if you have behavioral situation where more Democrats are doing something, those unaffiliateds who are doing the same thing are probably Democratic leaning unaffiliateds.
Andy, walk us through some of the areas, predominantly the congressional districts that you're keeping an eye on and looking at some of those data points for.
Yeah, well, there's several interesting races. I think the ones that have the highest turnout so far, the one that is leading by far is the 11th district. There's about 14,000 votes so far in that one, and that one's interesting because you have Chuck Edwards. He's the incumbent Republican. He has I haven't seen any polling on this, but from folks that live out west, from what I've heard, he has a pretty spirited challenge from Adam Smith, who is an activist in that part of the state, made himself a name doing Hurricane Helene relief there. And then you have Jamie Yeager, who is from a prominent Democratic family out of Buncombe County, and he has several challengers on the Democratic side. So you have both sides are driving turnout. Otherwise, you have the first district, which had out in the eastern part of the state, there are several Republicans running for that one in order to win what they hope is going to be a new Republican district. They just redistricted that one. And then we have the fourth district Democratic primary, which is a repeat of the 2022 primary between Valerie Fauché and Nita Alum, sorry. And that is going to be a very interesting primary because so far Alum has been outraising Fauché in fundraising. And that one's going to be that's a safe Democratic seat. So whoever wins that primary is going to represent this part of North Carolina.
And, it is kind of interesting, having followed some of the chatter on social media, which is, of course, always a risk over the last couple of weeks here, Andy. It is interesting in areas that are very blue or areas that are very red. These primaries, for all intents and purposes, are the general election. Whoever is successful come the evening of March the 3rd will go on to becoming the next county commissioner, the next school board member, the next member of the North Carolina General Assembly. It is interesting that what is traditionally a very long campaign period, when you look from primary to general, is really compressed into the span of about 8 or 9 weeks. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And we see that, and we notice that more in these large urban areas like your Mecklenburg counties or your Guilford counties, which tend to be more Democratic, especially in the cities, Charlotte and Greensboro. And so, yeah, like you said, for the most part, once the Democrat wins that primary there, then there's really not much going on in the November election. There might be a sacrificial candidate. Sometimes there's a surprise. Especially like maybe on some of these districts on the edge of those urban counties. Similarly, Republicans are really fighting hard now in these rural areas because they know, for the most part, if you win in a rural district as a Republican in the primary, you're going to carry that November election. And so folks are doing all that kind of get out the vote work that you normally associate with the November election as much as they can, considering resources, doing it now in the primary.
Two other areas I want to ask you about. I want to look at Mecklenburg County. There's a very interesting sheriff's race there that has garnered some state and even national attention due to some hearings in the North Carolina General Assembly. And then another area, Andy, which is a relatively small population center up on the Virginia border, Rockingham County. That is where the Senate president and Phil Berger resides. He's the longest serving Senate president in North Carolina history. He's facing a very tough primary challenge from the sheriff of Rockingham County and Sam Page. What are you seeing in those two counties in terms of voter turnout thus far?
Well, turnout's going fairly well. Mecklenburg is a little strange. I mean, they are the second most populous county, but so far their turnout has been well behind Wake County, which is the largest county in the state. And this has been something that we've been noticing with Mecklenburg. Mecklenburg has been suffering from relatively low turnout, especially for its size, for these past couple of cycles. And I'm not sure exactly what is driving that. But it's not horrible. They have about 10,000 voters turned out compared to about 13 for Wake County. And so that probably helps the incumbents usually, because usually when you have a big turnout, that's driving people. It's a lot of times it's a change agent there. So perhaps Sheriff McFadden might be doing okay. It's hard to read the tea leaves on this one, especially since we have very limited data so far. But so far, the turnout in Mecklenburg is not fantastic. Over there in the 26th Senate District with Berger and Page, so far Rockingham is dominating. They're about 80% of the turnout is on the Rockingham side of that district, a much smaller portion in Guilford. Now, as we know, sheriffs tend to be very powerful figures politically in their home counties. They're certainly the most prominent countywide elected official. And so Page may be competitive, maybe even ahead, it's hard to say, of Berger and Rockingham. So Berger would like to see those Guilford County numbers rise because presumably Page doesn't have that kind of penetration in the Guilford County portion of the 26th district. So if you're Berger, you probably want to see those Guilford County numbers go up as much as possible.
Andy, for all the different data that we walked through this morning, and maybe for folks that live outside of Mecklenburg or Wake or Rockingham County, maybe they want to dig into what those numbers are looking like in their community. You can sort by voting location, a lot of really great data. Where can they go and do that today?
Well, we have it at our Carolina Elections site. If you just search for carolinaelections.com/tracker, or if you just do a search on Vote Tracker, that should come up, or Carolina Elections, that should come up. Any one of those should get you there. Also, if you go to the John Locke webpage, I regularly have, every Monday, I'm posting up data points there. So we do a review of the data on that page as well.
We really appreciate the information this morning. We'll continue the discussion with Dr. Andy Jackson from the John Locke Foundation in the weeks to come as we head towards the end of that early voting period. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:48 on Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. We'll get another look at the roadways on your Wednesday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. A couple of it.
It's 5:54. Good morning again. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Charlotte's FM News Talk 107.9 WBT. Communities in western North Carolina are set to become the beneficiaries of nearly $5.7 million in grants from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality's Flood Resiliency Blueprint. All of that to help reduce flood risks in the French Broad River Basin. That is out in western North Carolina. The governor made the announcement Monday in Woodfin, that is in Buncombe County, and said during the announcement, rebuilding western North Carolina after Helene means rebuilding stronger and smarter, as well as preparing for future storms. These grants not only rebuild and restore the French Broad River Basin, but also help protect the surrounding communities so generations of North Carolinians can live safely. The funding will go towards 8 different projects that will create new floodwater storage, restore and reconnecting floodplains, as well as reallocating facilities and infrastructure out of what is deemed to be harm's way, and as well as improving water quality. The blueprint previously funded some $3.16 million for 8 projects dedicated to long-term flood resiliency within the basin. That was in 2024 and 2025. And overall, the initiative has now funded 81 projects totaling more than $40 million. Catastrophic flooding from hurricanes like Florence, Matthew, Tropical Storm Fred have led the North Carolina General Assembly back in 2021 to pass legislation appropriating nearly $20 million to the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality to develop a statewide flood resiliency blueprint. That to study river basins that are prone to flooding and create decision tools for flood mitigation investments and strategies for local watersheds to river basins. It is the largest statewide flood mitigation investment in North Carolina history, with the blueprint being used to assist flooding risk, identify data gaps, and offer recommendations to reduce flood risks in each targeted watershed. A key tool that is being used by the North Carolina Environmental Quality is something called 2D modeling, which uses both hydraulic and hydrologic of modeling and goes beyond traditional modeling that is used by federal agencies like FEMA, which only use analysis from past events from river basin flooding. This 2D modeling allows the state to look at future conditions for not only river flooding, but also flooding caused by regular heavy rain events, which may be disconnected from a major tropical storm. We've got all of the details and the amounts of money that are being awarded to areas in western North Carolina. Those details over on our website, carolinajournal.com, with the headline, NCDEQ awards $5.7 million for western North Carolina flooding mitigation projects here across North Carolina. Well, I guess that cue means that I am out of here. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. We're back with you tomorrow morning, 5 to 6, right here on Charlotte's FM News Talk 107.9 WBT.